So this is the community that we organize. And just to talk a little bit about San Francisco as a sanctuary city, just to give a little bit of history on the sanctuary movement in the United States. The sanctuary movement started in the 80s, in the early 80s, and it came out of the fact that there were a lot of immigrants coming from Central America, from Guatemala, El Salvador, looking for, they needed help, right? They were trying to escape the civil war that was happening there, right? And because the U.S. was funding what was going on in those countries, right, to stop the spread of communism, God forbid, right? Right, the U.S. was funding, they weren't going to help the people who were coming, you know, saying, you're doing this to us, right? You're funding the governments that are trying to destroy us, to kill us, basically. And so, what was the U.S. response? You can't come here. We're not going to give you amnesty, we're not going to give you anything. And so what happened was a lot of religious groups came together, a lot of religious groups opened their church doors and said, we're going to be a sanctuary for you, we're going to protect you from immigration coming in and sending you back home. Because if you get sent back home, you die, right? And so that's what happened. Groups across the country came together, and in 1989, San Francisco became a sanctuary city. And a lot of other cities followed. There's a lot of cities in the United States that are sanctuary cities, right? So that's great, right? So basically, in the United States, a sanctuary city means that it's a safe haven, supposed, I'm putting it in quotes, a safe haven for immigrants. And that means that immigrants have access to services in those cities. So, for example, in San Francisco, if you're undocumented, you have emergency medical care, right? Your children have medical coverage. It doesn't matter. You have access to shelters, you have access to food banks, you have access to schools for your children. So, I mean, that sounds like a paradise, basically, compared to what's going on here. I was reading the fact sheet here about what's not happening here, and it's really sad, right? So, it's important that we're here and we learn from each other and try to mobilize. But there's still problems with the sanctuary ordinance. Because in San Francisco, it means that the police can't turn you over to federal officials, can't turn you over to immigration. Unless immigration has an arrest warrant, then they can cooperate. What's been happening recently, since last year, July of last year, there's been an increasing attack on the immigrant community, and so there's been a lot of groups, including our groups, that have been fighting back. And so, at the mid last year, 3 important things started happening. There was increasing raids and deportations on the immigrant community in San Francisco, and so there was one huge raid happening at this huge taqueria called Balazo. And so they ended up raiding a bunch of taquerias. They arrested more than 60 people, and some of them are still in the process, you know, with their ankle bracelets on their legs, trying to figure out whether they're going to be able to stay here or whether they're going to go, right? This is happening in San Francisco. This is happening in a sanctuary city, one of the most progressive, supposedly progressive cities in the world, right? And so the sanctuary policy doesn't save everyone from everything, right? It allows people access to services, and that's great, but there's still no way to fight federal officials when they want to come in and just start deporting people. And there's been increasing attacks on immigrants across the country, not just in San Francisco, but across the country. And this started, well, after 9/11 with the Department of Homeland Security, but also in 2006 when the Bush administration really wanted to push this really terrible immigration reform, right? And so they started funneling a lot more funds into the ICE, right? Immigration and Custom Enforcement. And so it was originally established to deport those who were terrorists, everything is in quotes, right? Terrorists, and also people who committed very violent crimes, right? And to deport them. But after time, they just started deporting people just to get their numbers up. They had to get, and since there was so much money, that's what they needed, so they just wanted to do. And so this is what we're experiencing in San Francisco, right? So we have some rights. Our immigrants have a lot more protection than, say, what's happening in Arizona, right? But the sanctuary policy in the United States isn't the perfect model, right? Our immigrants are still being attacked, they're still being deported, there's still exploitation happening, right? So that's why it's important that we learn from each other, and maybe once you're organizing and fighting for this sanctuary policy, you can say, you know what, we're gonna take some things, we're gonna learn from that, but we're gonna fight for more, right? Because what we're experiencing isn't what we're looking for our communities, and there's an increasing movement for a new sanctuary movement in the United States, right? And so that's what I wanted to share with you all about our experience in San Francisco. But I wanted to end with the Unity Clap. How many of you are familiar or have ever heard of the Unity Clap?
Early, yeah.
Early, okay. Basically, the Unity Clap, the history of the Unity Clap, it comes from Cesar Chavez, and when he was organizing farm workers in California. And a lot of the farm workers were either Latino or Filipino, and so there was a lot of, well, they had language barriers, right? And so they wanted to come up with something that they could all do together, right? And so they came up with this clap, and I'm going to share it with you. And so I'm going to start. You start clapping very slowly. Just follow my clap, and then it just gets faster and faster, right? Because that's how movement builds, right? So we'll start. Ready? You guys are all ready already. Woo! Okay. So let's get started. Ready? It's the first time I've been in a room with people who didn't know the Unity Clap. It's so amazing, and I'm so proud to be here, and thank you for inviting me here today.